welcome back to Here Be Dragons. I am your host, as always, Stephen Stark, and this week we're back to the I Know That Nerd, one of my favorite things to do on the whole channel. Do a lot of different stuff here, but this is my favorite series, just a one-on-one conversation with people who I think are pillars of our fan community. And
oh God.
Well, hey, that's my experience. This is based on my experience, of course, but
sure.
We have Clint from the Learned Hands podcast, half of the Learned Hands. The other half of that podcast, Mary, has been a guest on the channel a few times, but I haven't been able to get her to do I Know That Nerd yet. I will, I promise you, and I can't wait. But until then, we'll just have to settle for Clint.
That's reasonable. I appreciate that.
Definitely not my lawyer. But yeah, Clint, I guess I've kind of introduced you, but tell everyone anything I didn't tell them about you. Introduce yourself. What do you do?
Well, first of all, I really want to thank you for having me on the channel. The Here Be Dragons channel is something that I have enjoyed in the past. And thank you for wanting to get to know me, a nerd. As Stephen said, I'm, I guess, one half of the Learned Hands podcast, which I started with Maester Mary at the beginning of the pandemic back in 2020. It seems like so long ago. Anyway, we've been doing that. We're about to release our 24th episode soon. And it's been a lot of fun getting to give back to the community some sort of content that people have quite surprisingly enjoyed. I've been part of the fandom in various ways for several years now. And so it's been really nice to kind of transition from content consumer or solely content consumer to content producer. That's been fun. So
yeah, like that is a fascinating process to me, which is one of the things I like to dig into on this series is that journey from infant to I'm a nerd to I'm really deep into this thing to I'm going to come full circle to some extent and create content, meta content for the fan community. All of our favorite podcasters and live streamers, that's what they did. That was their journey. And it's different for everyone. So I use the first question I usually like to ask my guests is, when did you know that you were a nerd?
That's a great question. I like to think that I've always known deep down, I was born that way.
Okay.
I don't know. I grew up in the 80s. And I think the first thing that I got like sort of obsessively into, that's a very nice Aaron.
Yes. Aaron always has good takes.
That's a wonderful take. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I often describe my podcast and have people look at me like, really? And I go, yeah, I know. People tend to like it. I don't know. I got really into Transformers, and I don't know.
Okay.
If you were really into Transformers when you were a kid.
At the right age, I absolutely was. My first ever Transformer was Starscream, and I loved it. I loved Transformers when I was a kid.
Yeah, mine was Soundwave. Like, I went to go see the movie, the original animated movie, like 5 times in the theaters and cried every time when Optimus Prime died and all that kind of stuff. And then, I kind of got away from it when I was in high school and college because I was trying to be cool and be a musician and all that kind of stuff. And when that all didn't work out, I kind of came back to it after I got old and gray. But I never really left it, if you will.
Right. I would never have guessed Transformers for you. But like, there are many doors that lead to this place.
Sure.
And Transformers is kind of nerdy. I had a friend in my 20s who would buy. He would, this was pre-Craigslist, pre-internet, or early internet days, and he would find Transformers and he would buy 2 broken Transformers so he could make one full.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I like was obsessive and had like the first generation. I had almost all of the first generation, and then like the second generation, the sort of movie generation, and like bought the comic books, which were literally just books that were made to sell toys. Like that's the thing. It wasn't like it was a fully formed IP before they started making the toys. It was all just to sell the toys. But that's okay. Because they're really cool. Yeah.
This is my mother.
Oh my God.
Commenting.
Oh.
Yeah. Mom's here every week. She's also a big old nerd.
Oh, that's
getting back to like original Star Trek and like Spider-Man was brand new and all that stuff. So I have the coolest nerd mom on the planet. I'm just saying.
Well, that's nice. I have told my mom about my podcast, and she's been like, "Well, that's interesting," and then that's it. Like, has never showed any interest. So that's nice. That's great.
So speaking of, like, you are in fact a practicing lawyer, and you have a lawyery style podcast. I mean, part of me fully understands how it happened, but like, can you just walk me through the process of like, because at some point the initial idea was there. Was that you? Was that Mary? Was that a third party?
So I started writing essays on my website, which is called Laws of Ice and Fire, which I started, I want to say in 2019. It was right around the time of season 8 of Game of Thrones. And I started writing those essays after I had read Fire and Blood, because Fire and Blood, and I've said this on the podcast a bunch of times, is a very thick. It's a very thick legal tome. I think there's a lot of legal issues that come through with it. When I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting from a state formation perspective. That's really interesting from a legal perspective. And it was sort of like a law school issue spotting thing that lasted for 700 pages or whatever it is. So I started writing these essays. And Mary, who is somebody who I'd read several of her essays before, she and I connected because she's also a practicing attorney. And we started joking that we were the Westeros Bar Association, and there was a couple other folks who are also lawyers. And then basically the pandemic hit, everything shut down. All of the hobbies that I used to have all went away in an instant. The Targaryens did. Yeah, they kind of did. They all went away in an instant. And so like one of the first, I honestly don't remember who sent the first message between Mary and I, but I was like, well, we could actually start the Westeros Bar Association. She and I had some plans to do some presentations at cons, maybe do some sort of like mock trials at cons. And those cons were all going to go away, of course. And so she was like, fuck it, let's do a podcast. And so
why not?
So it was definitely her idea to do the podcast. It was kind of my idea with the legal issues of Game of Thrones, but then we sort of molded together like Voltron or like the Constructicons, if we're continuing the Transformer metaphor.
You know what? We'll go with which. I wanted the Constructicons, the OG ones. I wanted them so bad.
Oh my God,
bad.
So fun.
I mean, God love her, mom was raising 3 boys and a girl. There wasn't money for a full Constructicon set, but that was the coolest. The first merger group. Anyway.
Oh my God, so good.
Kelly wants to know if there's any places she can get a decent taco.
Sure. Yes. I mean, I always recommend El Metate, which is 2 blocks from my house here in San Francisco.
She is fishing for that answer, of course.
Yes. They're more well known for their burritos, but their tacos are excellent as well. Also, really enjoy their quesadillas if you get a chance.
But don't misspell it when you tweet about it.
No. Poor Pat got put in Twitter jail for like a few days because he misspelled it.
It's funny in hindsight.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do really love what you and Mary are doing. It's so unique. And I was talking about this with some friends last night, even. Like, I am not a particularly deeply interested in law.
Fair.
I'm not. But you're the way the two of you present it, have fun doing it, and do it with such passion. I love it. I love listening to you guys. The charisma that you both have really shines through, you know?
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. It is something that we try really hard to do, which is present sort of high-minded legal concepts, or with Mary, it's often high-minded philosophical contexts or concepts or ethical concepts in ways that are accessible to people who have not had their brain broken by law school, and that's kind of what we really strive to do. And so it's really great to hear that. I'm really gratified to hear that feedback, because that's something that we really try and focus on.
And it's not that I'm disinterested, understand, but, you know, law is not something that I have ever really thought about studying. I would never want to be a lawyer.
I don't blame you. You should not be a lawyer.
Like, I feel like that's one of those things. If you can find it, if you can do anything else, you should.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Like being a professional singer or something,
yes,
you know?
Yes. I have I volunteer a lot for a civic education program, and so a lot of kids, after working with them, come up to me and they ask whether I should be a lawyer, and I really try and do as much as I can to dissuade them, or basically make sure that they really want to be a lawyer. Otherwise, they should not do it. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, but the practice of law is really not for everyone.
Yeah, like there are plenty of people who would hate what I do for a living, I'm sure. So I'm a land surveyor. I measure people's properties for a living. By extension, the law I know the most about is land law.
Okay.
Specifically Texas land law, but tangentially, that means my favorite episode of the Learned Hands podcast also has my favorite character George R.R. Martin has ever written, which is, you know, Dunk the Lunk. I love me some Dunk. He is the best. It's got Rohan Weber in it. It's because there's a lot of land law in that episode about the Checky water.
Right.
And so that's my favorite of what you have done so far. There's been a couple others that were really great. The trial of the horny trial of Rhaegar Targaryen. I mean, who doesn't love that episode? Is that not your number one episode?
I think it's the most fun episode for sure. And it was definitely the most work that we had to put together. We are hoping and planning to do other trial episodes in the future, but it was definitely the most labor intensive, but it really paid off. I thought it was really fun. And I also really loved the water rights episode, which I think is our 8th or 9th episode that we did. And that was one that I really had to convince Mary to do, because she was like, this is going to be super boring. Who wants to learn about water rights? And I convinced her. It's one of the few things that I've ever convinced Mary about, and we did it, and it actually turned out great.
Well, again, it's my favorite. I'm biased for reasons, but it's my favorite. It's got Dunk in it, it's got Rohan Weber in it, and it's got land law in it. So
yeah, it's called Prayers for Rain. So it's got a Cure reference in the title. I mean, what more could you want? Right.
I just saw something. Oh yes, Trevor wants to know, what kind of law do you practice?
So right now, I work for the California Department of Justice. I'm a deputy attorney general in the government law section, which means most of the stuff that I do is defending the state of California when we get sued for various things. Sometimes we sue people on behalf of or for other reasons. During the last administration, my office, though not me, was involved a lot in suing the Trump administration for some of the awful things that they were doing there.
Right.
So that's what I do now. I used to practice in class action work. I was a class action plaintiff's lawyer. I used to be a property litigator. I've been practicing now for 15, 16 years, almost all in litigation. So I've done trials and all that kind of fun stuff. And now I'm a deputy attorney general, which sounds really cool and feels really cool to say. So
yeah, oh yeah, deputy attorney general.
Yeah. I mean, I get a badge. I don't have it because of COVID, but like theoretically, I get a badge. Not that I don't do any law enforcement in any way, but like I don't know. I just want a badge.
So. And you deserve one.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Well, I'm pretty sure I can say I've never had a deputy attorney general on the channel before. I mean, it is possible, but I think it's unlikely.
It's possible. I mean, it's always possible. You never know.
Sure. And you practice in California?
I do. And I have practiced in federal courts all over the country, but now my practice is pretty much exclusively California.
Right on. Well, let's steer this back towards some nerdy stuff. There were actually a couple of people wrote in and asked me questions beforehand.
Oh, God.
I want to make sure I get to those. So I'm going to start with Lo the Lynx sent me a few questions. I'll pull one of her.
Of course they did.
Right. I'll pull one of their questions first. So they say, what is your favorite A Song of Ice and Fire fandom memory?
Oh, fandom memory. Okay. Well, I think it would have to be going to Con of Thrones 2019. That's the only convention that I've ever been to in my life. Mm-hmm. It's the only nerd convention that I've ever been to. I went with my wife and a bunch of friends that I had met through the fandom. And it was, I knew that I was going to have a good time, but I didn't realize how much of a good time that I was going to have spending, 3 or 4 days sort of immersed in just deep nerdery, met a lot of great people. Some people that I am still very close to. I met Mary at that con.
Right.
And she and I hung out quite a bit. And that's kind of where we, I think, forged a nice connection. I met you briefly, Stephen, although you didn't remember it.
I don't. I met 50 bajillion people that weekend.
It's fine.
It must have been like that then.
It was. It totally was. And I remember it because you are a very distinctive person. And I remember.
I do have a look.
Yeah. Yes. I want to point out that I was pretty drunk the entire time. So there's a lot of stuff that I don't remember, but I had the best time there.
Yeah,
I can't wait until we can get back to conventions.
Yeah. Are you going to Ice and Fire Con?
I am.
I will see you there.
It will actually be my 45th birthday. I think the first day or the second day of Ice and Fire Con. Yes.
Awesome.
Yep. But I'll be there.
I will toast to you.
Fair enough.
I don't drink at all. Haven't drunk anything for years and years. It's just not my bag.
Sure.
Not even from an alcohol. I never had a problem with alcohol. I just was I don't like this. I'm done.
Totally reasonable.
There are, shall we say, Wheezy's even referencing it for us right now. There are other things I do that might affect my ability to remember things over a convention weekend, if you know what I mean.
I mean, your mother's here, so
no, she knows.
Okay.
Hey, no big deal.
All right.
But yeah, she's Yeah, my memory's not always the sharpest for those types of things.
Reasonable.
But I am with you. It's one of the best weekends of my life. I ranked Dallas the year before just above it, but that's my hometown, and I threw a barbecue and got all kinds of people to come and hang out. So that was really, really awesome.
Yeah, that sounds great.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to April. Well, I'll fist bump you. I'll buy you a beer or something.
Sounds great. Can't wait.
So yeah, that's a you kind of dodged the question, what's your favorite fandom memory? And you're like, this 72-hour period.
That's fair.
So I'm gonna ask again. Do you have like a specific moment from the weekend that was just like nothing can top that?
Yes. I think the first night I was at a hotel bar, the hotel bar where everybody was staying at. Stephen doesn't drink. He drinks nothing. That's true. You should drink water. I think the first night where I was at the hotel bar, and it felt like, it felt like the fandom come to life, in the sense that there is a podcaster that I've been listening to for a while. There's a person that I have talked to quite a bit over a Slack or over a Twitter DM.
Yeah.
And like, you give out a bunch of hugs, and there's Kim Renfro and Joanna Robinson and like those folks, and who I'm am lucky enough to say I'm friends with as well. And so it's so that first night was the moment that I was like, this is where I want to be. This is great, and this feels like home in a lot of great ways. And I do want to say that that was one of the nights that I thought more about, rather than just writing essays or which are fine, and I don't mean to denigrate anybody who writes essays, is that I thought maybe I should try and do something more in terms of content production.
So maybe the birth, the nascent nugget of the podcast was born there.
Maybe. I think you could say that.
The grain of sand that will become the pearl.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Right on. Well, hold on. I'm catching up with the chat. Oh, Leaf is telling me that I should twist the lid. Unfortunately, the way this lid closes, the artwork, you can't really see it. This is a Sanrixian coffee cup. I wish I could unscrew it halfway and drink from it without it spilling all over me, but that is unfortunately not the case. So
I love that design.
I do too. It's one of my favorites.
I have the picture, or I have that sticker on the back of the laptop that I'm looking at right now. So I can't show you.
I have a t-shirt and a mask with that on there too. So yeah. I'm always happy to shill Sanri swag. Like this is your first logo ever.
Yep.
And this Sanri right here, like I could tell by looking that it's her.
It is her, and it is astonishingly good. It's one of those things that Mary, like, I am close to Mallory in the sense that we've met briefly at Con, I think again, and like she's been great supporting the podcast. But Mary and Mallory are also very, very close, and I was talking about, well, maybe we should get a logo done, and Mary was like, Sanri's going to do it, she's going to do it, and I was like, okay, that's fine. And when I first saw the sketches for that, I was blown away. My favorite little details and you can see it if you don't move, Stephen, is that Mary's hand has a manicure right there. You see that? And then also Mallory gave me the Robb Stark's crown, and which I really appreciated. So.
Yeah, I do too. Is there a reason you're the ice and she's the fire?
I think it just sort of worked out that way. I don't know. I really don't know that there's a reason. I know that Mary has said that it works for her because she's more of, for Star Wars reasons, like she's like more of a Sith person.
Okay.
So I think that might be it.
Yeah, I would picture her as having a red lightsaber for sure.
Yep.
What color is your lightsaber?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably green. It's green.
And that is the best possible answer. Mine is also green. Green is the best lightsaber color. Just saying it.
Yeah, I mean, I was a Luke kid growing up, so yeah.
Me too. Did you openly weep at the end of The Mandalorian season 2?
I lost it. I was like, oh my god. Yeah, I lost it. It was great.
Yeah. I feel like Luke is my guy. Mark Hamill is my guy. I don't know that I would get super starstruck by many people, but if you want to watch a grown man cry, just put me in a room with Mark Hamill, and it will happen. I promise you.
Well, I want you to have that opportunity, Stephen. I really do.
I don't know.
Yeah,
if I do.
Yeah. I think we all want to be Han, but like we're not that. I'm not that cool. So like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moment of the year on TV for me.
Fair, reasonable.
You a big Star Wars fan in general?
Yes. I haven't gotten. I've seen all the movies a billion times.
Sure.
Except for the last one, which I've only seen once. But we're not talking about that. And then I have started watching the Clone Wars. I'm not all the way through it. It's one of the things that Mary bugs me about a lot. But I really enjoy the world in general. I'm just not as deep into it as I have been for other things.
Right. I get you on that. We just finished. We've been doing like a season by season watch through. We got all the way through Clone Wars. We're on Rebels right now.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we might be doing Rebels season 3 coming up. But Clone Wars to me is one of those shows that just like the first season, I watched it, and especially in the early episodes, I'm like, oof, this is rough, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
But as time went on, it got better and better and better. And the end of like the last 4 episodes, just slap them together, put them on the big screen. I will pay money to go watch that movie. So
interesting. Good. Yeah, I am a little bit stuck. I think almost all the way through the first season, and everybody tells me I just got to get past it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of episodes. Is the problem?
So. There is.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the last 2 seasons are like basically half the size of the rest, but you're not wrong. There's a lot of stuff to chug through, but it does just keep getting better.
Good.
Less Jar Jar, less C-3PO.
Both of those are, I think, important.
I don't disagree. Eric, the Guilty Undertaker, says Clone Wars is what the prequels should have been. It'll get there for you. Again, if you're still in season 1, I don't think you're really there yet.
Probably not.
How do you? All right, I'll throw this out there then. How are you feeling about Ahsoka right now?
Well, I think that she's great, and I know that she, or at least my understanding is that she is essentially the central character, and that makes sense given the kind of way in which Star Wars is about becoming. It's about the hero's journey, and she's the one who kind of starts as the nascent hero and goes on. I also, from what I can pick up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's also a lot about showing how the Jedi and the Jedi were like, not always the good guys, and often the bad guys. And I know that she has a break with the Jedi, which makes sense as well.
I will tell you, like, Rex is probably the co-main of that show. It's the show about Ahsoka and Rex, if you ask me. But I would tell you, just stick with it. It's good. It's good. Definitely worth it.
Fair enough. Sounds good.
Okay, well, I'm also going to throw it, we've got 26 people watching live right now. If you guys have a question for Clint, go ahead and throw it out there. Let's keep it rated PG-13 and don't ask for his address. Y'all know better than that, but
I mean, I live 2 blocks from El Metate in San Francisco.
Right. So, you know, we can start sweeping the area.
Yep.
But feel free to ask questions, and I will throw them up, and we'll get to those. In the meantime, Micah Clark wrote and asked me a question. I think he's at work. He can't be here live. But Micah says, I need to know who Clint thinks out of the main series of Song of Ice and Fire characters would be the one to make their version of Magna Carta.
Oh my God.
I think he kind of miswrote that. He said Magna Carta. What I think he meant was the Magna Carta.
No. Micah was correct when he wrote it. There's no "the" in front of Magna Carta.
I'm pretty sure I've heard it before.
No. No, because, and so Stephen is baiting me because this is one of my bugaboos, because for people who don't know me or don't follow me on Twitter, which I don't really recommend you follow me on Twitter, but the upshot is, like, people piss me off by saying the Magna Carta all the time, when saying the Magna Carta is redundant and inaccurate, because Magna Carta means there is no article in Latin. It's by saying the Magna Carta, you're basically saying the Great Charter. But setting all that aside, there are many Magna Cartas. There's a Magna Carta 1215. There's a Magna Carta 1217, and it keeps getting reissued all the time for like 150 years. So the upshot is it's just inaccurate. So there's no "the" before Magna Carta. Anyway, the answer to the question that Micah asked is that so Micah asks who would issue a Magna Carta. Well,
who would be the one to make their version of it is his actual way of wording it.
Okay. So Magna Carta, for those of you who don't know, was essentially an agreement between King John, King Richard the Lionheart, I think that's right. Or maybe it was King John and then the second one was Richard the Lionheart. Doesn't matter. The British king and a bunch of barons who were like, who beat the king in a battle and were like, we're either going to kill you or you're going to agree to like give us special fishing rights. That was literally all Magna Carta was. And then the king was like, sure, that's fine. And they sign the Great Charter at Runnymede. And then immediately the king dies. And then the next king comes on and is like, tears up Magna Carta like Cersei does with the will that King Robert signed. So who would create Magna Carta of the main series? So it can't be a king, right? The king would not create a Magna Carta because it would have to be somebody forcing a king to adhere to a Magna Carta. And of the main series, sort of a revolutionary who is against the king to force, or the monarch, to force them to like kind of, agree to some shit. I would say, honestly, like before he dies, Beric Dondarrion dies. Like finally, Beric Dondarrion might be that person, but it would also have to be a baron. So it might actually be. I mean, it might actually be Ned Stark. Now that I'm saying it, like the sort of revolutionary Ned Stark before he becomes Hand of the King.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer, and I love it. Ned is all. I love it. I love the character of Ned. Love him to death.
He's my favorite. Yes,
you and I have talked about this. The first panel I ever did was me trying to argue that he's not as honorable as people think he is.
Ooh.
But like, it came from a position of love. It really did. But yeah, love him. Kelly just says, Kelly's regular question is, what's the best concert you've ever been to?
Oh, that's a great question, Kelly. Okay. Oh, Okay. So there's going to be a couple of different answers to this because um, when you say great, that can have a couple of different meanings. One could be like the most impressive show that you've ever seen, um, and sort of like from a musical perspective, awesome show. And that show would be I saw Prince on my birthday in 2013 at a venue that holds a maximum of 300 people.
Oh, wow.
And he was, I mean, he's the greatest guitar player I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen all of the good ones. He was the greatest musician I've ever seen in my life. He played for like 2.5 hours, went through all the hits, but also did a lot of improvisation. And you know, I was 30 feet from Prince, and that's a religious experience.
I can imagine.
Sure. The concert that I saw that changed my life, though, was I saw before they hit. This would have been like 1992 ish, 92 or 93. I saw Green Day at a show in Berkeley at a place called Berkeley Square. There was like 35 people there because they had not hit. And it was like a friend of mine dragged me to the show. I had been playing guitar for a little while and had wanted to be the next Jimi Hendrix and be very, very technically proficient and very good. And I didn't really know anything about punk or punk rock or anything like that. And then somebody dragged me to the show, and it was Green Day and a couple of other bands, but really it was Green Day. And I just lost it. I was like, this is incredible, in the sense that, you know, they were not technically proficient. They're punks.
Right.
They're playing fast and loud. And it was great. And people were super into it. And I loved it. So I kind of became a punk after that. So those are my two. That's my answer. There's two answers.
Hey, it's good stuff, man. I would love to have seen Green Day like when they were just a color in a day of the week, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they're like tiny little kids, you know, like just playing little fast love songs. It was great.
Right on. Guilty Undertaker has a great question. Tyrion Lannister has retained you as his defense lawyer after he's accused of killing Joffrey. What's your defense strategy? Go.
Well, that's a great question. We actually had an episode on that. I think it was episode 10 or 11. It's called My Uncle Kevin, and we had Stanford Fraser on, who is an actual criminal defense lawyer, and he laid out the strategy. And here's the strategy. You should listen to the episode because it's really good, and he has a lot of really interesting things to say about the strategies and like how Tyrion's trial differs from kind of normal trials. But the strategy, the way to do it, and I say this as somebody who is a fan at the same time, it's to pin it all on Sansa. Sansa isn't there, right? So she can't defend herself. So you point at the empty chair. When the facts and the law are against you, you point at the empty chair and say, they did it. And you can't prove otherwise. And, you know, like given the anti-Stark sentiment at the court, that might find some purchase
I love it.
With the panel that was judging it. So that's what I would do.
It's a great answer. We're going to go on to another equally thought-provoking question. Okay. Is cereal soup?
No.
Okay. I'm not going to require you to defend your position.
Good, because I can't.
I agree. Cereal is not soup.
Right.
I love this question from Joe S. About characters forming bands. Who would make the greatest punk band, metal band, and jazz quartet?
Okay, great question.
Answer as much or as little of this as you want. This is a pretty open-ended question.
So I think for a punk band, honestly, Gendry would be somebody who I would think of first, because Gendry kind of grew up like poor, but with a chip on his shoulder. Hi, Mary. Hi, Mary. Gendry kind of grew up poor with a chip on his shoulder, but also with decent means. So I would say Gendry is probably my front person for my ASWAF punk band. Let's see. The metal is definitely Thoros of Myr, who I think is super metal in many different ways. He's my front person. And jazz. So I'm not a huge jazz fan, but jazz requires a lot of improvisation and technical proficiency. So I'm going to say Arya.
Tyrion.
Tyrion would also be. Tyrion actually is a great answer, because Tyrion would be like, Tyrion is a huge jazz fan, like absolutely.
He would almost have to be, I think.
Yep. Yeah, so that's a great answer.
I don't know. I think
Tom O'Sevens would be a punk. I totally agree with Guilty Undertaker. The Magnar of Then seems very metal. Yes.
Euron, at least book Euron. No,
yep.
You know what? No, he's an emo.
So the
screamo, maybe.
The lead singer of the emo band is John.
That's true.
Or like industrial, like John listens to a lot of Nine Inch Nails, just a fuck ton of Nine Inch Nails. Like, and probably people are annoyed at him for not listening to anything else. But yeah.
I love that this is what we're spending our time talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite A Song of Ice and Fire character?
Yeah, I agree with Jess.
Jess agrees with you.
Yeah, well, either is fine.
Right. So, do you have a favorite A Song of Ice and Fire character?
Oh, my favorite A Song of Ice and Fire? Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I missed the question.
Oh, that's fine. StreamYard drops words sometimes.
Yeah, it's Ned. It's Ned. Or okay. Ned is the character that I identify with the most. So it's Ned.
Is there something specifically about Ned that draws you in? I mean, what are the qualities that make Ned the best?
Sure.
Defend your position, counselor.
Sure. So the main, I'll tell this story, and I've told this story in other contexts. So it's not like overly personal or anything like that. But the thing that I most relate to with Ned is how he deals, or how his character, he tries the best he can. He doesn't always know what to do, doesn't always connect with people, but his motivations are largely shaped by a desire to do the best thing that he can, and also some kind of foundational trauma that he had, specifically with the death of his sister.
Right.
And for me, the reason why Ned and I relate, or I relate to Ned, I don't know whether Ned relates to me. He hasn't mentioned it lately, but
I have it on good authority. He does.
Sure. Is that I have a sister who is estranged. She's still alive, but it happened in childbirth. She had a terrible reaction that basically caused her to kind of lose her purchase on sanity. And so basically I kind of feel like I lost my sister because she had a terrible experience with childhood. And she had a kid who I feel very protective of, who I still feel very protective of. And so that kind of foundational trauma that Ned is really trying to work through speaks to me very personally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I'm estranged from my sister as well, so I get it. I get where that is a very relatable aspect of his character. I don't know if he's my favorite. He's top 5 for sure.
Sure.
I love Ned to death. Yeah, it's his morality, though, that is the most attractive quality, in my opinion, for Ned.
I totally agree. And I think it would be so easy for him in so many different ways. And I grant a lot of the criticisms that people have of him, that he, for example, that he was not necessarily the greatest dad to Sansa. He was not necessarily also the greatest dad to Arya in many ways. That he should have, gotten the Bruce Bolton does. Yes.
I'm
Bruce
sorry.
Bolton
There's some great conversation going on in the chat right
Yeah.
now about the bands in Westeros. Is good.
Yeah. Danny McKay says Bruce Bolton is a Kenny G fan for sure. But I really like the actions that he takes to, protect children. Like, that's his motivation. He must find some way to save the children. He, resigns over Danny. He gives Cersei a heads up when he doesn't have any real reason to do that other than to save the kids that he goes out of his way to try and save, to his detriment. And I think I really like that. That makes me very happy.
Yeah. Something about somebody with a very strong moral compass. Mm-hmm. It appeals to me too. So I think maybe, so we've gotten a little bit of the backstory about your journey into nerd fandom, and we've kind of like caught up on where you are now also. But one of the things I would like to touch on, the sort of middle bit. At some point, you found A Song of Ice and Fire, and then it became the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Sure.
What's that look like for you?
So I was a show watcher, watched the show for the first 3 seasons, had no desire to read the books, even though a bunch of my friends were like, you got to read the books, they're way better. And I was like, whatever. And then the Red Wedding happened. This is very common. The Red Wedding happened, which I did not see coming in any way. And
all your book buddies were like, ugly looking at you. We told you.
Absolutely. And so I was like, fuck, okay, well, I got to read all these books. So I read all the books basically before season 4, but there was a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense. When the first read through, you're not like, no matter how close you're paying attention, you're going to miss a bunch. And so I started reading the chapter by chapter read throughs by Stephen Attewell on his blog. And I literally just Googled A Song of Ice and Fire explainer and somehow ended up there.
Okay.
And so I would kind of read a chapter and then go back and read the essay that Stephen Attewell had written. And by the way, if folks have not read Stephen Attewell's series of essays on chapter by chapter, they're incredible. And very detailed, very in depth. And so, but the problem was, at the time, he was basically only halfway through A Clash of Kings. And so that basically, once I got past him, I had to look elsewhere. And so I think I stumbled on the Wars of Ice and Fire blog that Brendan Beefish and a couple other folks were doing. Definitely found some Tumblrs, and then eventually ended up with Radio Westeros and History of Westeros, and started listening to podcasts. And that was the journey, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I'm just always curious, as I say, there's a lot of different doors that lead us here. For me, it was specifically History of Westeros podcast.
Yeah.
Was the first sort of my introduction into, look at this rabbit hole. I wonder how far down it goes. And, to some degree, we're all still falling down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. And I think, so I think as soon as I started reading it, or reading Stephen's essays, I think in one of his first few chapters, he points out a very obvious R plus L equals J reference in one of the early chapters. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Are you kidding? And that blew my mind. I didn't know that was the case. And so that kind of led me, I think, to one of Radio Westeros's first episodes is on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. And so your podcast is pretty well devoted just to A Song of Ice and Fire, although it wouldn't
So
have
far.
to be. Wouldn't
Yeah.
have to be. I'm looking forward to some of the Expanse stuff that you guys inevitably must do.
Yeah, we have a plan, and hopefully we'll be able to do it, to do a live stream about the Expanse both before season 6 and after season 6. I am like halfway through book 7 of the Expanse right now, and plan to be finished by the time book 9 and season 6 come out. We're both very excited about that. We have also talked about doing other properties, including Clone Wars, including some of the other stuff, or some other well, we're going to do something on the Green Knight for Christmas, which I think is absolutely right up our alley. And we're also, of course, getting ready for House of the Dragon. Probably going to do reviews like every other person or every other podcast out there, but you know,
I will not be doing that. Like,
that's fair.
Maybe like at the end of the season we'll talk about it or something.
Sure.
I don't know. It's possible, but I have a lot of friends who make really, really excellent A Song of Ice and Fire content. So literally the only time we've ever talked about George's works is we've done conversations about the Hedge Knight and the Sworn Sword. Haven't even made it to the Mystery Knight yet.
No.
But that is it. Because if you want really great A Song of Ice and Fire content, I know 47 people that make way better stuff than I would. And I'll just refer you to them. There's one of them right there.
Well, I appreciate that. We have been having a really good time doing a series on the Dance of the Dragons. We're going to have our 4th episode in that series come out in a week or so. And there are so much. I mean, the Dance of the Dragons is so sexy in terms of, like, you know, there's dragons fighting dragons and all that kind of stuff. But it's actually got a lot of like legal issues to tease out as well. And so we've been having a really good time.
Here's a good question from another good one from Joe S. Is the Earth legal system in the Expanse analogous to the English Chancery Court in Dickens' Bleak House?
Well, I have to be honest with Joe. I don't necessarily remember, or I don't know that I've read Dickens' Bleak House. I really do, though I really do appreciate how the legal system in the Expanse is teased out so much, or is talked about so much. There's so much discussion of international law and like really mundane contract law. So that's really fun. So I don't know the answer to that, Joe. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's fair. We stumped you.
That's fair. Yeah.
With 3 illegal questions you couldn't answer.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Joe. You made us all look so smart. Okay, Lo sent in a few questions. I want to make sure I get them all in.
Yeah, I want all the Lo questions for sure.
Yeah, they're great. They ask some. They're just so smart.
They are.
This is a good one. What Learned Hands episode are you the most proud of?
I really appreciate that question. And I was actually thinking about that before I came on. In terms of most proud of, we work really hard on all of our episodes. And so I'm proud of them all, even the ones that I'm not as that I don't think are quite as good as some of the other ones. But honestly, if you're going to pin me down, our most recent episode that we released was on immigration and sort of refugees at the wall. And we had on Akash Saran, who is who just graduated law school with a focus on immigration law. And they and Mary both had a lot of amazing stuff to say about immigration law, which is a subject that I really don't have a whole lot of knowledge about. And so I'm proud of that in the sense that, it took a while to get done because we worked really hard on, making sure that we got everything in that we wanted to get in. But 2, I think really presented some questions about the law in general and refugees and the free folk that I think don't always get talked about in the fandom. One of which is like, is the wall itself legitimate? Given that there's really no evidence that it ever kept out the others, and it probably won't. And instead, what it did and has done for centuries is essentially separate a group of people from the South, possibly illegitimately. That it wasn't intended to separate. Like nobody says that the wall was put up to, keep the free folk out. That wasn't the point. But it still does, and the Night's Watch still enforces that. And I think that it's just, it's obviously one of the things that we often do. If you've ever listened to our podcast and you're like, keep politics out of my podcasts or my fantasy, and I get that impulse, but like our podcast is not for you. So, like we draw very clear analogies between border walls and the border wall that Trump wanted to set up at the southern border to the big giant ice wall border that is guarded by the Night's Watch. And we try and talk about, how that's legitimate. And so I was proud of that discussion, even though I didn't pay too much, or I don't feel like I was moving the ball much on that episode, but I was proud of how my co-hosts really did.
So. Well, look, you are a very smart guy. Like most of your episodes, you're carrying half the weight of that conversation, I
don't mean just to. I appreciate that. I really do. And believe me, nobody needs to like pump up my ego.
Well, I'm going to do it anyway, because I will say, like, podcasting is not just about being super knowledgeable in your thing, and right. It's not even just about being able to present that. It's also about like interacting with your guest in the right way, and if something's not super clear the way your partner presented it, you ask that follow-up question for clarification, even though you might understand
right.
the answer. You might not need the answer, but some of their listeners it's a skill that you use, much like your legal skills. It's just a different set. And you guys are great fun to listen to. You obviously have a lot of fun with each other doing the thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I honestly think that doing the podcast and listening back to my own particular verbal tics and the way that I talk has improved my advocacy, my actual real world job, because sometimes my brain goes faster than my mouth. And so podcasting has helped me kind of normalize those two. I want to point out that Aaron in the chat pointed out that Brotherhood Without War Crimes deals with a ton of in real life issues too, and I appreciate that she said that it was great. That's also an episode that I'm very, very proud of, that we worked on with Jeff from the Nauticast, who people probably have heard of.
Is that beefish guy?
No, it's a different guy.
The guy who's sort of like Beef.
Yeah, he's a failed author. Yes, it's that one. No, he was fantastic, and it was great to get a chance to do that. That was a topic that he actually suggested, and so we were like, come onto our podcast and let's do it. And so he was great on that, and I think that was a lot of fun.
He's such a character. Like I've never met him. I've never worked with him in any way, but he's such a character. Like every time I interact with him on Twitter, I'm just like, the guy's got wit to spare.
Yeah. And he was great. And we like, it was great writing the outline for that, because there was a bunch of times where I was like, just inserting like, Jeff, do your voice here, do the Jeff voice. And I got to play Jeff like a marionette. It was wonderful.
Sweet. Well, we've already been going for a full hour. So I'm going to do my mid-roll, and then we'll come back. This is the mid-roll. This is the halfway point, not the end point. We still have a whole other hour of conversation to go, so stick with us. But this is the part of the video where I remember that I do a YouTube thing, and I say, please comment, please like the video or the live stream. Please subscribe if you have not subscribed. I would appreciate it a lot. We do all kinds of nerdy content here. I know that nerd is just one of the things that we do. So we talk about Star Wars and Star Trek, and when The Witcher comes back, we're going to talk about The Witcher, and going to be talking about The Expanse when it comes back. So yeah, we've got a lot of great stuff coming up, especially in December. Next week in November, we actually never figured out specifically what we're doing next week. We do stream every Sunday at the same time, so I'm calling an audible now. We're just going to go back to Star Wars Rebels, y'all. So we'll be talking season 3 of Star Wars Rebels next week, and yeah, that'll be great. You should. John Webster is my regular co-host. This guy right here. He's got his own channel too. It's called John Webster Film, just like it says right there. Last night he had a really fun conversation with Lady Triple, Christina, where they talked about the 3rd installment of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. And it is so fun because those two really love those films. Watching them just geek out for 2 hours about the pirate movie was a lot of fun.
I don't think I've seen that one. I should watch that one.
Yeah, it's good. It really is. It's the sexiest Keira Knightley's ever been.
Wow. Okay.
In my opinion. Am I going to do any Wheel of Time stuff? That is a really great question. I do not have an answer because I have no idea if I'm going to like it. This is a channel where I talk about stuff I like in general. So I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch the first few episodes and we'll go from there. But if I find it enjoyable enough, yes, I will do that. I have not been watching Foundation, although I know John just finished watching Foundation. There's never enough time to watch the stuff. Like, let's see, next week, not next week, the week after, Wheel of Time, first episode's coming out. Star Trek Discovery's coming back. In December, we've got the Book of Boba Fett, The Witcher Season 2, Book of, what's the other one? The Expanse. So, yeah, it's super hard to keep up with stuff.
For sure.
And I play a lot of D&D too. So, guys, just come back and check. And if there is something that you really would love to hear us talk about, just let me know. Gonna shout out our patrons because you guys are awesome. You help offset the costs of doing business over here at Here Be Dragons. So our Patreon High Council is chaired by our alpha patron, Ridiculous Ed Tollett, aka Sean, who is probably getting off work right about now and heading home. Drive safe, brother. We love you. Our High Council also consists of Lord John Bronsteen the Wise, Sixto Sounds, aka JP the Axe Grinder, and the lovely Lady Leaf Underhill. And they are supported by the lords and ladies of the realm, including Ryan Stavka, the Russian Quartermaster, the fantastic Reflective Rambling, and the wonderful Arch-Maester Emma. Thank you, patrons, so much for making this something that doesn't cost me to do. StreamYard costs money. You know what I mean? Anyway, love you guys so much. If you want to become a patron, link down in the description. Down in the description also, I have links to Clint's Twitter, which I know he said don't follow him, but follow him. He's great. But there's also a link to westerosbar.org down there, which is sort of like your umbrella website, is it not? Like you can find links to everything else there.
Yeah, you can find links to our podcast, which you can download at any of your podcast um, platforms. We're called Learned Hands. We're pretty much on all of them. But WesteroSbar.org is where you can go to figure out how to get your own Westerosi Bar Association bar number and get access to the Slack and additional content. And do so by donating to a pre-approved legal charity or legal charity.
We're kicking off hour 2 with this conversation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So what do you have coming up over there on the Learned Hands podcast? Anything in the pipeline?
Yes. So we are deep in the weeds on our dance party series, which is what we're doing for the Dance of the Dragons. We just recorded the other night our 24th episode, which is our 4th dance party episode, basically covering, for those of you who know what this is, basically covering the Battle of the Gullet up to the Butcher's Ball, Rhaenyra taking the throne. And I can't wait to see it put together because honestly, while we were recording it, both Mary and I thought that this might be our best episode. I think it's really great. It's going to be really great. So that's the episode that'll come out in a week or so whenever we get it edited. And then after that, we're going to do another dance party episode because we are kind of realizing that there are a bunch of bunch of parts of the dance we want to cover in detail before House of the Dragon comes out, which we anticipate will be probably April-ish of next year.
Think it's going to be that early?
That's when they would release Thrones typically. So it's possible. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if they say it's going to be in June or July, that would not surprise me. But, the sort of April-May timeframe is when they would release Thrones. And my hunch is that's when they're going to do it.
I mean, it's as good a theory as I've heard anywhere else. So.
Sure. Well, Joanna Robinson, who is a friend of mine. So friend of the pod. She has said,
just a casual name drop.
So as a quick aside, one time I was having a drink with Joanna at a bar near my house, not at El Metate, but at a different place. And somebody literally came up to her and was like, "Are you Joanna Robinson?" And she had to be like, "Yeah, I am." And it was really funny. And then afterwards, she denies that she's famous. It's really, really funny.
Right. Even though she gets recognized on the street.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. So anyway, her theory is that it's going to come out around April and May because that's the end of the Emmy timeframe. And that HBO cares about Emmys. And so if I'm going to cite an expert to have an expert opinion on when House of the Dragon it's going to come out, it's Joanna Robinson, and that's the thought. So
I met her at the Dallas Con of Thrones. She was a genuinely lovely person.
She's one of the best people I've ever met. She's great. So we're going to do a dance party episode that's coming out shortly. We're going to do another dance party episode. As Stephen mentioned, we are both very big fans of The Expanse. So we're probably going to have, we're going to do an Expanse episode that's probably going to be a live stream that we're going to do just for our Westerosi Bar Association members. We might release it on the main feed, not sure. We're also going to do a Green Knight Christmas special because both of us really loved the Green Knight and we think it is completely up our alley in terms of like honor and also contracts. And if you haven't seen the Green Knight, it's wonderful. It's also a Christmas movie. So, that's always fun.
I have not seen it.
You should. It's great. You would love it. Honestly, I think you would.
Yeah. John keeps telling me I should watch it too. So maybe I'll get to it.
So we will have another episode. We might have an episode on mental health. We have a long list of potential episodes to come out after that. In the new year, our hope is to hit our stretch goal of $4,000 in donations. We're about $750 away from hitting that stretch goal. And when we do, that obligates us as the Learned Hands podcast to producing another trial episode. So folks who liked the horny trial of Rhaegar Targaryen, of course, I think most people did. If you want to hear something similar with a new cast of characters who are WBA members, then I would encourage you to donate to one of the legal charities that we mentioned on westerosbar.org, or another legal charity that if you want to shoot us a DM and say, hey, if I donate here, will that count? The idea with the charities is basically, if it's a charity that increases access to the legal system, pays for people's lawyers, that kind of thing, or works towards progressive goals, then we're gonna credit that and just send us a copy of your donation, basically a receipt, and we will give you all sorts of great benefits, and we will put that towards our $4,000 stretch goal. So hopefully in January-ish, we'll be ready to start on trial episode number 2.
I hope so. That's a great segue into what I wanted to talk about anyway, which is the fact that you and Mary have decided you're not doing, like a Patreon or anything, right. Which is, my hat is off to the two of you. I really, really love my patrons for making this not cost me anything. But I'm in love with the idea of what you have done instead, which is like, I'm in the WBA Slack. Mm-hmm. You get there by making a charitable donation to a legal charity. And it is a very lively group with lots of different conversations, everything from sports to what are you drinking tonight, to legal issues, to, just life stuff in general. And I'm not super active in there. I have my own Slack group that's, of course, like my name's on the shingle outside. But I do pop into the WBA Slack from time to time, and it's just a lot of really smart people in there. I know Virginie is in there. Hi, Virginie. It's nice to see you. Cassie's in there, and Leaf is in there, and Sanri, who was in the chat earlier, is in there. Like, it's a fantastic place, and it is such a worthy undertaking. I love that you made stretch goals, and everybody gets their own unique number. I got 137, by the way. If anybody can tell me why 137 matters, I will give you 5 Here Be Dragons points, redeemable for a high five when we meet in person. No, it's a physics thing.
Oh.
So like most people wouldn't get there. Oh, and that reminds me, we've got time still. Are you ready to do the math portion?
Oh God. Sure. Lay it on me. Let me get my calculator. Okay.
Okay. One of the things I promised Clint when I asked him to come do this was that there would be no math.
So I do want to before
I have a mathematician's brain. So I know how much people are like, no math, please, and I'm like, I do math literally every day of my life at work.
So there's a question in the chat from Guilty Undertaker. Do the charities have to be American? The answer is no. And in fact, many of our donors, many of our WBA members are folks from around the country, around the world, which I did not expect, because we're just 2 American lawyers and we don't have international law backgrounds in any way, shape, or form. But a lot of folks from all around the world have liked our podcast and have joined the WBA. Virginie is one of them. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, so if there's a charity in a non-American charity that you want to donate to, just run it by us first. But like, it's probably going to work as long as it aligns with the kind of things that we wanted to do. I do want to point out before we move on too far, sure, that we in no way, like, I support a lot of creators on Patreon. It's great that people support creators. It was not the sort of a grand charitable gesture, or I don't know. It was mostly that we felt like we didn't necessarily want to take folks' money. And also, like, very selfishly, if I take money from doing sort of a legal podcast, I feel sort of ethically bound to write a memo, or I've got to let my boss know. And I don't really want to let my boss know about the podcast because that would be embarrassing, because I would probably have to write a memo about it, which would go to the supervising deputy attorney general, which would then go to the senior assistant attorney general, and probably also go to the head of the civil division of the attorney general's office. And that would be mortifyingly embarrassing. So that's the main reason why we don't do a Patreon, and we just tell you to give your money to somebody else.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And you're definitely not anybody's lawyer because you're not taking money from anyone too.
That's also sort of a
right. That's just part of it anyway, huh?
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, come back with your questions if you've got them. I've got a couple. One of my off the wall ones that I love to ask is a hot dog a sandwich, and where do you fall in that argument? And do you care?
I don't care, but I would say no.
Okay.
Because there's only one slice of bread rather than two, generally.
What if you tore the bun in half?
Yeah, so then maybe.
Okay, I can tell you really deeply care about this topic, so we're gonna spend the next 15 minutes talking about it.
Fair enough.
Oh man, I'm catching up with the chat here. Oh, I saw one up earlier. I think it was Joe S. asked a really great question earlier. There it is. Have you thought about applying for continuing legal education credit for your podcast?
That's a great question. And yes, I have thought about it. My job, because I work for the state of California, I don't actually need to do any CLEs anymore. It's a weird carve out that California has, where if you work for the government, you don't have to do CLE. So, I guess I could apply for it so that other people could get CLEs. But quite frankly, I don't care whether you do your CLEs or not. It's fine. So Mary, I know, has talked about it, and Mary should absolutely get credit. I just don't have to do it anymore, which is one of this. It's really a dumb rule, but it's a rule that I take very strong advantage of.
I mean, why not?
Right.
Land surveying, you have to do continuing education as well. If you are the sort of licensed person putting their stamp on there and by extension accepting legal responsibility for the product. I'm not that guy, so I don't have to worry about it. But yeah. How much do I have to donate to get that hot dog question to stop being asked? We'll talk about it, Lee. We'll talk. I'll set a dollar amount that is probably too high because I love the hot dog question. It's stupid, but I love it. Yeah. Lo had one more question. I want to make sure I get that. Oh, you know what? We've already kind of talked about it, but I'll just throw it out there. Can you tease some potential future Learned Hands topics that you would want to do?
So, in addition to the ones that we've talked about, we're going to cover all of the dance, like I said before, House of the Dragon. But there's such a long list of topics. We haven't actually done a question or an episode on trial by combat, which is a thing that everybody wants us to do an episode on. So that's definitely something that we're going to do. I know that we have talked about having some people, perhaps even the person who asked the question, on a future episode to talk about sort of punishments in Game of Thrones, as well as, kind of the philosophical reasons behind punishments. There's such a long list of topics that I don't have in front of me, but we get tweets all the time that are like, hey, have you thought about doing this? I think the most recent one I saw was from Reds, who tweeted like something about the wall being a giant OSHA violation, and I was like, "Lol, that's funny," and also, okay, I'll put that on the list.
Like, where are the guardrails?
Right.
For me, it's totally different. Like, I look at the wall and I think about the compressibility of ice, and I'm like, that is actually impossible to build.
I believe you.
I'm the, I have engineer's brain. Like, ice, you can't stack ice that way; it will just smush.
Oh, there's a great and then Guilty Undertaker. Okay, that's another one that I got to put on the list. An episode about piracy and maritime law. That's absolutely right up our alley. Yeah.
Do you know Kelly, the Jaded Redhead?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. She is a resource for all your she is a noted nautical nerd. I highly recommend that. Like, she is more knowledgeable than you think she is about maritime stuff.
No, I believe that. And it's one of those things. One of the fun things about this podcast is that it kind of forces us to learn things about areas of law that we do not specialize in. And when we first started the podcast, again, we didn't think anybody would listen. We thought that like Frank would listen. That was it. Because he's a lawyer nerd and like wanted to that.
Right.
But we've got a lot of or a fair amount of listeners. And so people want to learn about all this stuff. And so, for example, the water rights episode, I didn't know anything about water rights, but I knew there is a body of law out there. And so we had to do a bunch of research on that. We had to do a bunch of research on the episode that we did with Brendan Beefish about laws of war, which I didn't really know anything about. Yes, Mary says Frank and our worst enemies. So we're going to listen. That's true. Yeah, that's what we thought. It was going to be like Frank and all of the opposing councils that we've had that we don't like. And so, yeah. The podcast does force us to like do research from time to time. So that's good. And yeah. I would have to do a lot of research on maritime law because I don't know a dick about it.
Right. Well, I'm just telling you, like, Kelly is a good resource for that. I mean, I don't want to, like, obviously volunteer someone, but she's trying to play it off. Look,
she's sailing in her picture.
She's in the rigging of a sailing ship.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I get it.
It's her job to know that stuff.
There's a question from Peadar Ron.
Oh yeah, Potter. It's Potter. Just
Potter.
He is our resident Irish troll. But if this, a lot of times what he's asking is very like taking the piss.
Got it. Well, these are both
maybe not
excellent questions, and both excellent like full on topics that we could tackle when we eventually run out of legal issues in A Song of Ice and Fire and switch to a full-on Expanse podcast. But I would say off the cuff, yes, given what I understand to be the law of the Expanse universe, is that there is such a thing as a legitimate salvage. The ship that it was the Tachi, that, and I forget the name of the ship that was blown up, that the Tachi escaped from. The Donager. Thank you. The Donager blew up. The Donager also essentially gave the Rossi crew the Rossi. They had it. They adversely possessed it for long enough. So I would say
I know adverse possession is a term I know from my line of work.
Yeah, it is. So I say yes, it's a legitimate salvage. Was Anderson Dawes guilty of incitement to riot and murder? Probably, yeah.
Yep, probably. Our in our Slack, our Expanse sort of in the WBA Slack, it's Free Navy.
Yep.
In the Hear Me Dragon Slack, it's legitimate salvage.
Legitimate salvage. I also have a sticker on my laptop that says legitimate salvage. So there you go.
Yeah, that's the title of my spaceship, is the USS Legitimate Salvage. I love it. Yeah, Jess is right. He is only ever serious about the Expanse. So Potter, like, most of the people who are sort of my regulars here come from the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom. It's, was my big fandom when I started doing stuff, and that's where how the mediums through which I know most of them. But Potter came when we started talking about the Expanse, and we have not figured out how to exercise him.
So your mom mentions that you haven't seen Black Sails.
I have not.
So you should remedy that immediately. Black Sails is one of those shows that is like, it's one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. Honestly, it's phenomenal. It's the best show I've ever seen about polyamory. I'm polyamorous in real life, and it's not even about polyamory. It's like my friend when people, a very good friend of mine who actually had a podcast about Black Sails. Her name's Daphne Olive. She was like, "You should watch Black Sails." And I was like, "What's it about?" And she's like, "Well, it's about pirates." And I'm like, "I don't give a fuck about pirates." And she was like, "Okay, but it's also about all this other stuff." Eventually she convinced me, and I started watching it. And the first season is pretty good. Then the last 3 seasons are the best last 3 seasons of any show I've ever seen in my life. Period.
Okay. Like, I'll put it on the list. There's so much stuff on my list.
So, but like Black Sails is one of those things that we will probably do we will definitely do an episode about at some point.
Yeah. Cassie will be very happy for that. You will make her cry if you move on to the Expanse without doing Black Sails.
So I'm gonna give Cassie a little bit of a heads up on this. We will probably not do the Black Sails episode right away, and here's why. Because I know a person who knows a person who knows John Steenberg, who is the guy who wrote Black Sails, who is going to be on the podcast. So who has agreed to do it, but he's busy with other stuff. So he is also an ex-lawyer, so we're gonna have him on.
Oh man, now I really do have to watch it, and I've only got until you got your surprise. Or that's an awesome get.
Yes, we're very excited about it. So
yeah, friend of a friend is a great way to get it too. Like,
yep,
nice. Aaron's got a really interesting question about, if you go back in time, what historical court trial would you want to sit in on?
Okay, so I'm assuming she means as either a judge or an advocate, and I think that the answers would probably be different depending on which they were. And if it's a court trial, then that means like a trial, like not the Supreme Court, but like at the trial court. So, I mean, to be honest with you, not a whole lot. Yes, this Teresa, that's my wife. That's my wife.
Hi, Teresa.
Yeah, I don't give a fuck about pirates. That's right. So if I were going to sit on a court trial as an advocate, as somebody who was arguing, I would want to sit on the Gideon v. Wainwright trial, which is I would want to be the advocate for Gideon, who was denied an attorney and convicted. And so Gideon v. Wainwright is the case where the Supreme Court ruled that you have to provide people attorneys. Basically, you can't not give people attorneys when they're accused of serious crimes. And that's, I think, a foundational case that people forget about a lot. So if I were that, and it's a sort of great case in general. If I were going to be a judge, I would want to sit. This is a little bit cheating, but I would want to sit on the trial that eventually became the 1971 Supreme Court case, Cohen v. California. And the facts in Cohen are super fun. The upshot was a dude who protested the war was accused of a petty crime basically a misdemeanor, and showed up to a California judge or California courtroom with a jacket that said "fuck the draft," and he was arrested for having that jacket for basically for obscenity. And eventually the Supreme Court ruled that because it was a political statement, the fact that it was obscene didn't matter. And so that's my favorite low-key Supreme Court case.
Okay.
Joe says, didn't Gideon proceed pro se all the way to the Supreme Court? He might have. He might have. I'm not 100% sure. It's possible.
Okay, again, legal stuff a little over my head. I mean, but when you have somebody who really knows what they're talking about and enjoys talking about it, and can deliver it in a way that is sort of like intelligible and consumable by the layperson, I love that stuff. I love it. That's why I keep coming back to a podcast about laws in a fictional universe that, if I'm being quite honest, I'm kind of over A Song of Ice and Fire in a lot of ways.
That's fair.
I don't know how much deeper I can go down the rabbit hole. I've looked in every nook and cranny, but like I still listen to you guys. Some of it is like I enjoy like the sort of the parasocial aspect of becoming involved in an ongoing podcast, or there are streamers that I watch. They don't know me, but like there's still that parasocial relationship there, and I do enjoy that. But it's just fun to learn new stuff too. Did I miss a question? Somebody's this is apparently, does Clint have any other recommendations for nerdy franchises in which the law or court systems are interestingly portrayed as a prominent or central theme? Somebody
That's a great question. And I am possibly I'm definitely not the best person to answer, because I'm not necessarily my nerdery. When I get really into something, I get obsessive about it and I don't necessarily spread out. So for example, I just started watching The Witcher the other day, and I found it sort of incomprehensible because I haven't read anything about it. But so like that would not be one that I would say. And I mean, the Expanse is like very rich in terms of the legal system. Honestly, Black Sails is very rich in terms of the legal system, even as sort of colonial and proto as it is. It's also about the right to revolution and how that interacts with empire, and that's a legal issue. Oh gosh, I know that I'm going to think of like 9 examples as soon as I leave, or as soon as we turn this off, but those are the ones that are jumping into the mind right now. I see somebody mentioned Daredevil. I think Daredevil is like, from what I saw on the MCU version of Daredevil, there's definitely, I mean, he's a lawyer, right? So he interacts a lot with folks. I mean, Watchmen was very legal. And the original Watchmen interacts the way that the legal system interacts with the original Watchmen is very legal. There's like the whole system of like the anti-superhero laws that interacts with it. And so, most is, sorry, Voice of Geekdom says, most of the legal stuff in Daredevil is just Matt Murdock showing up / doing his job properly, or doing his job completely improperly often as well.
You missed the not showing up / doing his job properly.
That's it. That's right. Sorry, I do miss it. Yes.
It's tough to like present a case, in court when you've got the crap kicked out of you the night before.
Indeed, that's true. Probably. I mean, it hasn't happened to me too many times, but once or twice. Okay. I mean, Dune is another example. Dune has a whole setup of like an interplanetary governmental structure and how that interacts with colonialism and the like sort of resources that are used and the legality of using those resources in a colonial setting. I mean, I know I've only read the first book and it's been a while. And then I saw the movie. I've seen both movies. One was really pretty good. The other one was not. But Dune is one of those things where you can. The thing about sort of the Learned Hands concept is that we could do an episode on that. I know Mary didn't particularly get super jazzed about the Dune movie, but like we could absolutely. There's just thinking off the top of my head, there's like 4 different legal issues just from that first movie, which is half of the first book, that we could do an episode about if we wanted to. We're focusing on A Song of Ice and Fire, but there's so many good stories will implicate how people use power. And anytime you implicate how people use power, you implicate law, because law is often the expression of power, the sort of legitimate expression of power. And so, I don't know. I realize I'm a lawyer and I have lawyer brain in general, but I see legal issues all around us, you know. So
imagine that you engage with your your entertainment through the lens of what you do for a living. Wouldn't know anything about that. Anyway, I digress. Yeah. There's been another couple of good questions here, and I've got a few that I want to make sure I get as well. Did you see the movie The Last Duel recently?
I haven't.
Okay.
And I know that people have said that it's good.
I actually found it very difficult to watch.
Okay.
I have a hard time recommending it to anyone. Trigger warning.
Got it.
It's difficult to watch, but we'll move on. There was a couple in here. Potter asked, who is your favorite fictional lawyer?
It's Vinny Gambini from My Cousin Vinny.
I mean,
that
the one. Is the objectively correct answer?
It's the objectively correct answer. My Cousin Vinny is the greatest lawyer movie of all time.
Yeah, like I literally want to ask you about lawyer comedy movies, but like remove that from the conversation. Like, give me 3 lawyer comedies that aren't My Cousin Vinny.
So I watched Liar Liar again for the first time since I became a lawyer. It actually is pretty good. It's decent for a lawyer comedy. I mean, the best lawyer comedy other than My Cousin Vinny is Legally Blonde. And that's kind of like I think it's not arguable that it's Legally Blonde. And then I don't know, what other lawyer comedies are there that I'm not thinking of? I never really watched like Ally McBeal or those kinds of shows because I just never really got into them. I watched a lot of Law and Order, but that's not a comedy. Yeah, everybody's quoting Lionel Hutz. He's wonderful.
He's way up there amongst fictional lawyers for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know what the third answer is. I'm sure that there are my top 5 favorite lawyer movies are basically My Cousin Vinny, 12 Angry Men, Legally Blonde, Michael Clayton, and then I don't know. I kind of go back and forth between several different ones.
Yeah, I mean, I already knew the answer to it was My Cousin Vinny, which for you, like, favorite, which is why I wanted to, like, dig to the next layer down.
Sure.
Because I love that movie, too. Like, Martha Tomei's killing it in that.
So they actually... Yeah, and they actually showed My Cousin Vinny, like the cross-examinations that Vinny does. Oh, and A Few Good Men is in my top 5. But okay. They show the cross-examinations that Vinny does in My Cousin Vinny in law schools. Like it's textbook. It's absolute textbook because if you remember the film, which you should, if you haven't seen it recently, you should go back. But basically, he has 3 different witnesses and he treats them in 3 different ways that work really well for the in front of the jury. There's like one guy who's very brash and is like, showing off and being like, this guy's a jerk, and he basically like dunks him, and shows how this guy is actually an idiot. But then there's a little old lady who needs her glasses, and he treats her with kid gloves because he doesn't want to like he doesn't want to be mean to her in front of the jury, because the jury will hate him if he does that. So there's like one bone to pick that I have with My Cousin Vinny and the legal decisions that get made, but everything else is perfect. So there you go.
I mean, okay, like, go off, brother.
Yep.
I love that movie too. I really do. Probably not even for the same reasons, but like, some of them obvious. Some of the same reasons, obviously. I mean, Marissa Tomei, right?
Right. I mean, also Marissa Tomei being like nuclear hot throughout the entire time, right. Like lick the screen, gorgeous. Yeah, that is an attraction, but it's also very legally accurate.
Right. Quite, and very funny too.
Oh my God, yeah.
Comedy's hard to nail. Anyway, I digress. Yo, we've got about 20 minutes left, so this is your last chance to get your questions in. I am going to make sure that I got everything that was sent to me. I don't see any questions that were submitted ahead of time that I haven't asked. So,
well, let me ask you a question.
Sure,
Steven.
By all means.
So you said that Ned is not necessarily your favorite character in A Song of Ice and Fire. Who would be your favorite character in A Song of Ice and Fire? And since we talked so much about The Expanse today, who is your favorite character in The Expanse?
Okay, now A Song of Ice and Fire. Are we talking books?
Sure.
Because like I make a distinction between the books and the show.
Okay, give me both. I want to know both.
So in the books, it's probably it's Arya, but like I have a real soft spot for young Griff. I'll call him young Griff. Like,
okay, that's a great answer.
I like to, when people say Fagon, I'm like, who are you talking about? You must mean Aegon the Sixth Targaryen.
Sure.
I love the idea of that character, but it's Arya. On the show, it's Sansa. Like, the fullness of her arc is my favorite.
Both of my favorite children, yes.
Right.
Sansa and Arya.
And for The Expanse, I mean, anybody who's watched our Expanse content already knows I have the biggest man crush on West Chatham. Amos is just my dude. His psychology is so complex and so interesting. I cannot get over how fun it is to watch that character just exist in a room on screen.
I agree. He's great.
Do you have a favorite Expanse character?
Yes. It's Avasarala.
And she's my number 2.
Yeah, she's wonderful in every way. And in some ways, like, a couple of my friends who had read the books before I started reading them were like, oh, Avasarala is better on screen. Or in the show, and in some ways I think that that's wrong. I think that she's actually better in the books. She's probably the best written politician I've ever read. Ooh. Basically the best politician character I've ever seen. It's great. I love her.
And Sheree plays that character just to the hilt.
Also, speaking of lick the screen hot, yes. I agree.
Like she's maybe old enough to be our mother.
I don't care. Do not care.
Either.
Call me, please, for the love of God.
Yep. Kelly wants to know what your favorite breakfast food is.
Grits. People said grits, I do like grits. Grits
They're
are
not
good.
Bad. They're really not.
Honestly, my ideal breakfast food is like a good Egg McMuffin, man. Like, it's just so good, like the little English muffin, egg, sausage. It's good.
My mother I will
yes
do that when we're off the air. I will make sure that happens.
That's great. Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Mom. I've totally Lost my train of thought. Thanks for derailing me.
Well, me too. I mean, goodness.
Yeah.
Whew.
Oh, yeah. The classic, how long does it take for the boiling water to soak into a grit?
The entire gritting world knows that it takes 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yes.
You sure about that 5 minutes? Are you sure about that 5 minutes? How accurate is that type of thing?
Right.
To be sort of combative with a witness like that. Does that happen?
Oh, yeah. It's great. So I have done that. Not that. The Grits Cross is like a top 5 moment in American legal history. You know, it's like Brown v. Board, Loving v. Virginia, a couple other ones, and the Grits Cross. But I would say, yeah. I mean, really digging into a witness is fun. It's yes, really digging into a witness is super fun. Really, hammering somebody. I have done it once. Really, most of the cases that I've had all of the cases I've had have been civil cases, and so the temperature is not quite so high. But there has been one time where I got to put somebody on the stand who I knew was going to lie, and he lied, and then I got to take out the documents that prove he lied and like do a little fun, you know, read what it says and like, can you explain that, and that sort of thing. It's super fun. I will say it's rare, and like it's not as fast paced as you see on TV.
Sure.
But it's cool. Though I will say, like, the coolest thing that is actually really great, that you think might be really great, but like is actually great, is when you get to like pound your hand on the table and be like, objection, Your Honor, in like a really indignant way, and have the judge go like, sustained. Feels fucking amazing. It's like the best feeling in the world.
Is that the best word in the world then? Sustained?
Yes. It's like, yeah, so, I got you.
So what is the second best? Is it suboptimal?
Suboptimal. Yeah, something like that. Sure.
Okay. People are asking about grits. What are grits? Virginie doesn't know what a grit is.
Yeah, so a grit is corn. It's corn, and then you soak the corn, so it actually gets like small and gritty, and it tastes really good. If it either tastes like nothing or it tastes really good depending on how much lard you put in it. So.
Right. Well, and like, how do you like your grits? Do you want like butter and sugar or salt, or like? There's a few different ways to prepare them, and they're good multiple ways. But yeah, they're kind of like chunky oatmeal, or not, but like gritty oatmeal.
Yeah.
Soggy, silty corn. I like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, this is not a podcast about grits,
but it could be.
It is a vehicle for cheese. I understand you sort of like on a spiritual level, Aaron. Like, people love pasta. Pasta is an excuse for me to eat my mom's spaghetti sauce.
There you go.
Yeah. So we're about 10 minutes out from the end. I'm going to hit you with it's a 3-parter that I like to give to everyone. I've forgotten a couple of guests a couple times, and I got chastised once for not doing it, so I'm not going to forget. Clint, let's make a movie about your life, okay?
Oh my God. Okay.
Who is going to play you? Whose unique directorial vision would you like to see interpreted? And then what do you think would be a good title for this film?
Oh my God. Oh, fuck. Who's going to play me? Well, I would pick Brad Pitt, but I need somebody actually sexy. No, I don't know. So I don't. Who do I want to play me is different than who would play me. Honestly, I'm like, this is somewhat of a cop out, but I don't think so. one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie of all time, is Rushmore. Have you seen Rushmore, Stephen?
God, if I have, it's been forever.
Okay. It's a Wes
Gene
Anderson
Hackman
movie.
in it?
What's that?
Is Gene Hackman in that movie?
No, it's Bill Murray.
I'm going to Google it real quick so I know what the heck you're talking about.
Okay. So, yeah. Decibel Downs says that Richard Madden should play me. I agree. Yes.
See, I actually have a left field answer for this.
Okay.
But please go ahead. Who?
All right. So my answer would be Jason Schwartzman, because Rushmore in many ways was kind of about me as a kid, as a high school kid. I was very much like the main character in Rushmore. I was like hyper involved in a lot of things, flailing to be interesting and creative in embarrassing ways. And I love Wes Anderson. I do, for the most part. So
it could be tricky too, because you told me that you're 45 or about to turn 45, and somebody who can play you throughout your whole life. It's not going to be easy to just pick one person.
Sure.
But my dark horse pick to play adult Clint, not because he looks like you, but because I think he could nail your personality, is Patton Oswalt.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Sure.
I think that would be a lot of fun. I'd watch that movie.
Yeah, Patton Oswalt is very funny. He's also in Veep, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. The question, and I forget who asked it, about shows where legal issues come up a lot. Veep is in there. Yeah, I could see that. But so my answer would be Jason Schwartzman. Wes Anderson should do it, and it's going to be Rushmore 2. That's
Rushmore 2.
Yep.
Okay, I love it. I'm going to keep pitching Patton Oswalt to you, but
okay.
But like, it's your movie. Make it however you want.
Sure.
I like versioning John Hamm.
Oh yeah, John Hamm. Also, yeah. I mean, I guess he's pretty enough to play me. I guess. I don't know. Yeah, John Hamm is great.
I hope I didn't offend you.
Not at all. No. Most people say Paul Giamatti, and
Paul
that
would be good too, because he's funny.
That makes me want to die. Like I love Paul Giamatti. He's super funny. He's super great. But like, people have told me that I look like him, and I'm like, oh, please don't tell me that. Just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least people compare you to an actual living human person. I used to get like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo.
Oh well, everybody loves Shaggy.
Zoinks.
Shaggy is like an international icon. Like,
I guess. Originally voiced by Casey Kasem.
Yes. No, I mean, like, there's a whole digression that Eddie Izzard goes into in their best special, which is called Dressed to Kill, which came out like 20 years ago, and I watched the other day and still holds up. So you should check it out. But they basically make the argument that like Shaggy is like a Falstaff level character, like Shakespearean, that everybody loves. So yeah.
I like this Rushmore.
Rushmore. I love that. That's better. That's it. That's
good. That's good.
Yes. Virginie is like John Hamm is steamy hot. Yes, that is true. That's the joke. That's the joke.
What is it? Lick the screen hot.
Yes, he is.
That's a new one on me, but it's very very evocative. I think is the best way to put it.
Sure.
Well, that is it for the questions that I had prepared. We've got just a few minutes. If anybody's got a last ditch, whatever, Clint is still here. We still got him for about 5 more minutes.
Yep. Anything you want to know?
Yeah, anything. Ask him anything. Now, none of your freaking business is a perfectly legitimate response.
That's fine. I'm an open book for the most part.
Yeah. But this is it. I just see. I hope they clean the TV screen very often at Clint's house. I'm gonna imagine they probably do.
They do. And yeah, it's gotten dark here. Oh, favorite Veep character. That's such a great question. Okay, so Julie Louis-Dreyfus is in my like top 5 favorite actors of all time. Also, like, I'm in love with her. I think she's like the hottest thing in the world. But Selena, the character that she plays in Veep, is awful and intentionally awful. Like, she's the worst. So my favorite Veep character is probably Richard Splett, who is played by Sam Richardson, who is in Detroiters and many different other things. He was also in Ted Lasso season 2. My second favorite, for the opposite reason, is the main man himself, Jonah Ryan, who is like the worst person ever made.
Okay, good answer. I haven't seen Veep, so
it's great. It's
really
phenomenal. It's my favorite sitcom of all time. It's also the most like accurate show made about American politics ever. You can only watch one sport for the rest of your life, both gender versions, but only one sport. Ooh, that's a great question. So my favorite sport is baseball, and so I would watch baseball. That's the.
You're just gonna stick with the classic, huh?
Yep.
What color are your favorite socks?
Black.
Mine too. Solid. Yep. What are your thoughts on the Seinfeld finale?
I thought it was okay. Not the best finale, but it was all right. Like, I thought I rolled my eyes at how they ended up in jail. The weirdest part about the Seinfeld finale is that they played a Green Day song on it. And again, I told you all that I saw them before they were big, and so to hear the Green Day song on the Seinfeld finale was bizarre.
If you believe in reincarnation, what do you hope to come back as? The lawyer in my lawyer brain says, if you don't believe in reincarnation, you don't have to answer the question.
I don't believe in reincarnation, but if I could be anything, it would probably be like a house cat or a dog.
That's a solid answer. Like, I think that is maybe objectively the correct answer.
Yeah.
Is there a case that should be considered foundational in your opinion, but isn't? Or what is the most ridiculous thing that you've actually seen make it to court?
Okay. Yeah, there are lots of cases that should be considered foundational, but are not. The one that's jumping to my mind, which is probably not the best answer, is a case called Hyleton versus the United States, which happened in I think 1786 or 1796, which is a case about, it really wasn't all that sexy, but it basically was the first time that Supreme Court used judicial review to uphold a statute. Everybody thinks, I have a whole spiel and I'm not going to get into it, about Marbury versus Madison, and everybody thinks that Marbury versus Madison established judicial review, and it didn't. But Hyleton versus United States actually was the first time it was used, and so it should be foundational in the way that Marbury is. But let's see. I've seen lots of dumb things get into court, or things that might seem small, but honestly, not that many that I would not think shouldn't have gotten into court, if that makes sense. Okay. That even if it's a small thing, like a lot of times those small things should get into court.
If only to establish a precedent.
That's right. So Betsy asked did I see and enjoy West Wing? I saw West Wing. My partner and I watched it, and it was actually, I convinced her to watch Game of Thrones she was like, if you watch the West Wing. And so I sat and I watched all of the West Wing after she finished Game of Thrones. And it was in the Trump era that I watched West Wing, and I hated it. I didn't hate it, but it's like such wish casting about American democracy in ways that it doesn't actually work. And so it's a very well-made show, and there were parts that I really enjoyed, but so much of it was very difficult to watch for me because it happened in a context that no longer exists. Like they were worried about the press how would the press think about something, and it's like nobody worries about this at all. So anyway,
I mean, that's fair, and like your reasons seem very legitimate. It is 8:00 Eastern, 7:00 my time, 5:00 your time.
Yep.
That means we're done here, y'all. This was. I figured we would enjoy ourselves. Clint, you are a very like. I listen to your podcast and I'm like, oh, this guy's witty. He's got some snappy like comebacks, and you're a funny guy. You've always
appreciate
it. So I figured this was going to be a good time, and it proved to be a good time, if I do say so myself.
I had a great time. It. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, like these are always a blast to do for me, and I really enjoy this series of videos, the I Know That Nerd series, because I don't have to do any homework,
Yeah.
I don't have to watch a movie or a season of television or whatever before I have to come in and talk. It's just sit down and riff with somebody that I already find interesting for a couple hours. And to be honest, like I learned some stuff about Magna Carta.
Sure. Yeah. Here to help.
And I've already got like 5 more questions that I could have asked, but unfortunately we are out of time, folks. I've got to cut this off. I have to get to sleep at a reasonable hour for work. You've got a whole life, Clint, to go do stuff to go do. But yes, thank you genuinely, Clint, for doing this. It was a lot of fun. I'm really glad we had the opportunity, that I got to know the real Clint a little bit better, that you all in the chat got to know the real Clint a little bit better. My chat section, I will say, is the best on YouTube. They are all fantastic people. Quite a few of them are actually. I believe it. Quite a few of them are actually in the WBA. Mm-hmm. Also, not all of them, but some. And if you're not, I do highly recommend go make a charitable donation to the Westeros or to one of the charities supported by the WBA. They are all worthy causes. I myself, I always donate to Rice's, Texas, when the time comes. Which is a great legal charity for immigrants trying to get into the United States, specifically in Texas.
Yeah. And we really appreciate your support, and I really appreciate you inviting me on, and it was great chatting with you and the folks in the chat.
It brought you some great questions tonight, both serious and ridiculous, and which is kind of how we do things around here.
Absolutely.
But so to everyone, thanks for coming. We will see you next week for I guess we're going to do season 3 of Star Wars Rebels. So go watch you some Star Wars Rebels animated series, and we'll be talking about that next week. The Learned Hands podcast has another dance party episode coming out soon. Is that right?
That's right. Should be out soon. Later end of this week, maybe early next week.
Yeah, I know. I saw on Twitter that you guys just recorded it, but they're always long. You've got to submit it to the fantastic little wolf bird who's going to do her thing, do her magic. But I look forward to that one.
All right. Sounds good.
But you guys, seriously, go donate, because I want that other trial episode. And you're about $700 in donations away from making that happen?
Yeah, I think we're going to hit it. We're hopefully going to hit it pretty soon. But yes, it'd be great.
And if you donate enough, you get access to the WBA Slack, which is another, social media where you can sink time into that you don't really have. That's how I look at them. It's pronounced wolf bird. You are correct, Aaron.
That's right.
Thank you for correcting me.
That is correct.
But we'll see you all next week for that. Clint, one last time, thank you so much. Chatters, love you guys. We'll see y'all next week. And until then, you know what it is. Peace and be excellent to each other.